Hey there, Skullheads. I'm Snags,
And I'm old Silky.
and we're going to be discussing a couple books and one movie about the Zodiac killer tonight.
Episode 50.
The Big 5-0.
50. So, shout out to Jack Lord. 50.
Hawaii 5-0. Yeah.
All the popos out there. 50. Episode 50.
That's half of 100 for those of you who aren't good at math.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to dedicate the episode mentioned to Carl Weathers passing, and more importantly, Wayne Kramer.
Wayne Kramer. That was a fucking gut punch. Somebody texted me that, and I was like, fuck. And Taylor Swift is still breathing.
Yeah, 75 years old. And, but, drugs, the 60s and 70s were pretty hard run for him. So
75 is not a bad age to kick off.
No, I
it's funny. I'm just now hearing that Wayne Kramer died from you guys. I just sold an MC5 record on eBay the other day. That's weird.
Yeah.
That's why he died, man, because you sold his record.
About 2 weeks ago, I'd say, Mike.
Gave up on old Wayne, and he fucking kicked the bucket.
Wow, yeah. I've got too many records and too little space, so had to sell some records, and that was one of them.
We got Mike Rabideau back to discuss the Zodiac killer with us. I did just want to jump in. Certain mysteries transcend to legends or blend into our social commentary and pop culture that fascinate us, captivate us. Thinking of like Jack the Ripper, Frank Morris and John and Clarence Anglin escaping from Alcatraz, D.B. Cooper hijacking, Bigfoot, Roswell. Just
Kennedy assassination.
Well, that's not a mystery.
It's a mystery to a lot of people. Not everybody's read the fucking book by the hitman.
No, but we all know the mafia killed him. Who pulled the trigger doesn't matter. Bobby Kennedy got his brother killed. So
that's the main prevailing theory. Anyways, a shitload of people get obsessed with that, just like they do with the other stuff, because it's murky and not clear.
Well, it's murky, and then if you were to solve it, it takes the power out. It takes the teeth out of it. Nobody wants to solve the Jack the Ripper case,
make it boring.
Well, it's got to be an industry over there in England. People coming over tourists.
Well, that one, I'll tell you, the theory I've read, I certainly didn't come up with it myself. I tend to believe, and I don't know who originated it, but my favorite version is From Hell by Alan Moore, and that is that old Prince Albert got himself in some trouble with a prostitute, and the Queen had several prostitutes killed just to cover up that it was just about the one.
There's an amazing book by Patricia Cornwell. She
wouldn't put it past them. They knocked off Princess Diana, most likely. So.
Oh yeah. Patricia Cornwell actually spent money on forensic testing. She thinks it was this guy Sickert, who was an artist as well. And there's paintings some believe might possibly be his renderings of actual murders.
As you see, there are different theories on all this shit, and Zodiac is no different.
Oh yeah, no different. But these are, like I said, these are all better left unsolved, and they'll be debated and kicked around forever among the true crime aficionados and stuff. So I'm going to do like a little timeline of what we're talking about. And then Snags is going to talk about the movie.
So let's just mention though the books and movies we're covering. So Silky's going to drop a timeline that's pretty much out of what book? Name the book and the author.
So the book, there's two books by Jarrett Kobek, Jaretttkobek, Jarrett Kobek. And the first book is called Motor Spirit. And this book is really everything you would need to know about the Zodiac slayings. There were 5 confirmed dead, possibly 20 to 28 total dead. He claimed in correspondence that he'd killed up to 37 people. Really no way to prove that. But so the first book is Motor Spirit, which I'm holding up for the viewers at home. And then
there are no viewers. We don't have video.
Don't say it. Just go with it. So then you're going to talk about the Zodiac movie. And
that one is based on the book Zodiac by Robert Graysmith. That book was released in 1986. And we'll get into that after Silky's done. And then what's Mike going to talk about? What book is he?
He's going to talk about How to Find Zodiac, the second book, which I'm holding up now, by Jarrett Kobek. This book is the one that kicked me over. This mentions a lot of people. Some people you've heard of, Snags, are in this book. So I highly recommend them both. They read so quick. And apart from just the true crime aspect, this author really taps into human behavior. He makes some just outstanding comparisons and comments that as you're reading it, you're like, oh, wow, like you just agree with just how people are. And then he's very skeptical. So he does his damnedest to exclude the suspect that he stumbles upon. And then as you go along, he just continues to get further into the spotlight versus being able to exclude him. He lived in the area. He fit the profile. He actually looked like some of the renderings. There's an actual photograph of him that looks exactly like one of the famous black and white descriptions of him. It's just a lot of stuff that by the end of that second book, it really changes your opinion on things. But so there were, like I said, 5 confirmed dead in December 20th of 1968. David Faraday, who was 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, who was 16, they were shot and killed in Benicia, California. They had pulled off the highway, a little parking area that was kind of like a lover's lane. And I've seen this real place. It's really just a soft shoulder off the side of the road. There's not a lot of room to maneuver.
You drove to the actual place?
No, there was a thing on Peacock about
a documentary,
Zodiac, and they take you to some of these places, and you can see firsthand. If you're parked there and somebody's coming down the road, you're not going to be paranoid to just jump out and get out of there. But once they pull up, it's very easy to be blocked in, or not really have any way to get the hell out of Dodge. But so that was in December of 1968, and they really had nothing to go on. He pulls up, shoots them, and drives off. And then in 1969, July 4th, Michael Maggio and Darlene Farron, he was 19, she was 22. They were shot and killed in Vallejo. If you're familiar with the movie, he pulled up, saw them, drove off, came back like 10 minutes later, and blocked them in, and came up with a flashlight, and he had kind of a rigged silencer on this squirrel gun thing and a flashlight mounted to the top of it, and shot Maggio a few times. He survived, but Darlene was killed. Now, in the book, he really fleshes out these people, kind of gives you a few weeks leading up to their murder, so you actually can kind of see them as people, and you can tell he'd interviewed family or friends that remember them, which is just tragic. They're not just a name in a book. Like you get a little bit of who they were, and they were so young. You wonder what they might have gone on to do. But anyway, the next couple, and this is the one that always kind of chills me out. Brian Hartnell, who was 20, and Cecilia Shepard, 22. She they're on a picnic in Lake Berryessa, and just down the way from where they're at was a Renaissance festival. And so they're there on a little picnic, beautiful blue sky day by the lake. And it's an open park, but there's really nobody there. And this man comes walking up dressed all in black with a like a hood, some kind of Renaissance hood with an insignia across his chest, almost like a knight. And he comes up and ties them both up and stabs her to death. Brian Hartnell survives. In the book, there's actually a transcription of an interview that he gives a few days after the fact, and it's I don't know that it was ever published, so it's really interesting to hear firsthand this kid's description of what happened. And so that was the main thing. And then the last one that they kind of attribute to the Zodiac killer was Paul Stein, who was a cab driver, and he was murdered near the Presidio in San Francisco. And the big thing with this one, there were witnesses that called the police from their apartment. They could look down and see everything. Apparently, and it's never been revealed, there was crucial evidence left behind in the cab. And then later in the Presidio, two police officers actually saw him walking away, and according to letters that the Zodiac sent into the newspapers, was that they almost got him. Like I think he made a mistake. I think that whole thing was very compulsive. He just acted or impulsive, and he acted on something and was sloppy getting away. It wasn't very well thought out. And I think this is the last of what you would see him do, because he almost got caught. It may have freaked him out to where he had to change his MO, So, but he sent letters to Vallejo Times Herald, San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner. He had ciphers. One wasn't solved for decades. But he sent these out, teasing the police that if they solve the one that's in the paper, it'll reveal his name, which was not the case. But, these two books really detail the times of the late 60s. Kobach discusses in detail the impossibility of police work pre-DNA evidence. You practically had to be standing over a victim in those days, to possibly get caught. There were fingerprints and witness testimony for most crimes. You just weren't able to rely on a lot of science at the time. and those guys worked their ass off, but scientifically, as far as DNA, you just didn't have that for another 20, 25 years.
There you go.
So that's the first book. It really fleshes out who this suspect was. As you get to know this guy, it just becomes clearer and clearer that he is obviously a prime suspect. By the end of the second book, I was really convinced that this was the guy.
And what's the guy's name? And
Paul Dewar, D-O-E-R. Paul
it.
Dewar. And, you know, the Zodiac at that time was desperate for the spotlight. He had the city of San Francisco terrified, but quickly became old news as the tumultuous times wore on. You had the Vietnam War on TV, the Manson murders.
We should mention though that the movie Dirty Harry was actually inspired by the Zodiac Killer,
and I believe that was in the theaters in '71.
Yeah, they call him the Scorpio Killer in that movie, but
I believe they mentioned Zodiac though in that, if I'm not mistaken. But one of the interesting things they mentioned in the book is the weekend before one of those first murders, on TV, in the TV guide, there's a Charlie Chan in San Francisco. And in that movie, the evil bad guy is the Zodiac. And it's really creepy. And at the time, you didn't have, you know, streaming or anything. You would have just caught something like this on TV by being home at that time.
Back when we were young, you had to plan to be in front of the TV at a certain time if you wanted to watch a show. I know that seems wild.
The show, you didn't, you know, it was more.
There was no pausing. Yeah, you had to run and take a whiz during the commercial.
You had to piss during the commercial, but as the show was starting, throughout households across the land,
everybody's scurrying around the TV.
Someone's sitting on the couch screaming, "It's starting! You're gonna miss it!" You know, all that shit. You know, but so in the book, he just talks about this guy. You know, the profile, mid-30s, doesn't fit in with the new kind of free love thing because he's a little bit older, but he's old enough. He's like too old to fit in with them, and just doesn't quite fit in with his peers. So he's kind of in the middle, and so by doing these murders, he's exerting some control. However, you know, newspapers, they're on to the next news, the next thing. And so with, you know, with MLK being assassinated, Bobby Kennedy, Vietnam, the Manson murders, it all kind of took a back seat. And then every once in a while he'd send another postcard. Hey, I'm gonna hurt all the kids on the school buses. And they're like, yeah, okay. You know, we got the Vietnam War going on, buddy. Let us know when you got a body again. And then across the country, you had Son of Sam. There was just so much going on across the nation. This guy had his moment and was like, yeah, next. And, you know, I think that really frustrated him.
Yeah, and whoever it actually was, because we don't know for sure. And if you watch the movie, they make a real compelling case that it was somebody else. I'll mention that when I summarize the movie. They were definitely attention starved, and they had this theory. They mentioned it in the movie. I don't know if they talked about it in the book, but the Zodiac Killer was saying people he killed were going to become his slaves in the afterlife.
Yes, yeah, that was a huge. Yeah.
So basically said he was collecting slaves by killing people. So this guy was obviously nutso boingo. Out of his freaking gourd.
Yes, but he's referring to things out of books and actual concepts. So he was very well read.
He still thought that the people he killed were going to be his slaves. So
right, but that's actually based on a concept, and it's in the book. I don't remember
still
what
nuts.
That's from, but he actually pulled that from like ancient literature or some shit.
Yeah, still nuts.
Yeah. So yeah, his thing about that is all through the book, and he got into these just long letters that sent out across the country to people, wanting people to hear him. He really needed an audience, and this was his way.
Obviously, some kind of social outcast, real lonely cat, and wanted attention.
Well, Paul Dewar had a wife and a kid.
Oh, damn!
Was not really there for his wife, and there's.
It's hard to if you're out killing people every night.
Well, right. After reading these two books, I came across actually a magazine where Jarrett Kobek interviews the daughter, and that just, if I didn't believe it all the way, after you hear her take on everything, it just sealed it for me. It really did. But anyway, go ahead, talk about the movie.
So I have not read the books like these other two cats here. I've watched the movie Zodiac a couple times, directed by David Fincher. Jake Gyllenhaal plays Robert Graysmith, who was the cartoonist at San Francisco Chronicle when all this was going on. He actually helped decipher some of the ciphers, and he basically sorry, I got distracted. It looks like what's his name dropped off the podcast. Is he coming back, Mike? Okay.
Oh, I'll
hear you.
So
curious.
Sorry about that.
That's all right, no worries. It's all good. So Jake Gyllenhaal, basically, the character he plays, Robert Graysmith. In reality, Robert Graysmith ended up getting obsessed with the Zodiac killings. Long after he worked at the San Francisco Chronicle, he just pursued it for years, a couple decades. He wrote the book Zodiac, which was published in 1986, the first big book on the subject. Mark Ruffalo plays a detective who's on the case, Dave Toschi, who turned out to be a little bit flaky, had some flaky characteristics, was an interesting cat. Robert Downey Jr. does a great job as Paul Avery, who's a lead writer on the stories about the Zodiac Killer, and also just a raging alcoholic, shades of Hunter S. Thompson.
Is it Ruffalo's character? Who's the guy that would write into the newspaper, basically
about
saying
himself? Yeah,
about himself.
That comes out late in the movie. Dave Toschi, the lead detective on the case, was actually faking letters to the editor of the newspapers, praising what a great job Dave Toschi is doing on the case,
which is so ugly and there's
unnecessary,
Yeah, and well, there are rumors now this book, the first one, actually shows actual postcards that were sent, so you get to see the real letters that he sent into the newspapers. And
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Toschi only maybe was proven to have done that once, which is still super stupid.
You do it once. Now I gotta wonder.
Well, they actually suspected him of writing one of the latter-day Zodiac letters.
That's what I'm saying.
He had forged this at least one letter as a fan of Dave Toschi to the newspapers,
Yeah, he was caught a couple times with that, but then a Zodiac letter, and you're like, dude,
he ended up getting cleared of that, but it really fucked his career.
Yeah, and rightfully so. You know, I mean, why do you need that? It's absurd to me.
And anyway, so again, Robert Downey Jr. does a great job playing Paul Avery, who's a writer on the case, and
hell of an actor.
Yeah, and they're basically all kind of start honing in on this one guy, Arthur Lee Allen. And if you watch the movie, there's a lot of fucking things that line up. As far as him living near victims, him having the exact same shoe size and military boots of the footprints that were found at the killings. And also he's just generally really fucking creepy.
Well, he was a pedophile, so I mean,
he was a confirmed pedophile and wore a Zodiac watch. Zodiac was a watch brand, and the logo on the watch was the logo that the Zodiac signed his letters with. The evidence that didn't line up was handwriting samples. He was ambidextrous, so he could write with both hands, and they took samples from both hands. And there was one handwriting expert who said it's not the same guy that's writing these notes. There was another handwriting expert that was kind of his apprentice who said, I wouldn't rule it out. So it was kind of inconclusive. They didn't have enough to convict initially. Later on in the early 90s, the kid that survived the shooting by the lake actually did identify him by photograph as the killer. And at that point, the authorities were going to arrest him. And before they could, he died of a heart attack. So who knows? Apparently, if you read these other books, this guy's just chucked out the window as a suspect. But that's what makes it fascinating is really he knows.
Well, I will say he's definitely a pedophile, and you know, in any case, and if you like an actor, if you like him for that, you can subconsciously try to fit them in more to be the guy. And I'm not saying I know for a fact this guy wasn't, but in this first book, he talks about some of the copycat slayings that had gone on.
That's the other thing. There could have been more than one Zodiac killer. There could have been the original guy, and then other people doing stuff and writing letters in. And,
well, and I would say that's probably very accurate because you got a guy that's like really captured everyone's imagination. He tells the newspapers, I want to see buttons on people out in the street wearing Zodiac buttons. In a sense, he was wanting to create a movement of Zodiac killers. Then you got
he wanted. Well, I also just wanted fans.
Yeah. Then you
next
got
to your peace and love and make love not war button, put a Zodiac button.
Then you got an actual murder where they wrote on the wall, very much like the Sharon Tate murders, about the Zodiac, like I am the Zodiac, which was not the Zodiac. It was a completely different MO, but it fits in with what he's saying in the book, how you had the real Zodiac, and then it became an identity that anyone could achieve. Like, I am the Zodiac. I'm the Zodiac. No, I'm the Zodiac. You know,
the other interesting thing in the film is Haas, Arthur Lee Allen, worked as a projectionist at a theater for a while. And there were a couple things tied into that, his time at the theater. There's a movie they used to screen a lot called The World's Most Dangerous Game, which is kind of alluded to in some of the letters.
It actually on television, like a week, another like that, Charlie Chan in San Francisco, The Dangerous Game aired on a Sunday night or something.
And that's about That's about hunting humans. That's
Hunting Humans,
the subject of that movie. The other interesting thing about his time at that theater is the theater posters. It was a small independent theater. It was before everybody had Photoshop and Microsoft Word and InDesign and all these graphic layout stuff. So they would just handwrite their posters for what's playing, and they found some of the posters and they cross-referenced it with the Zodiac killer's handwriting, and it fucking matched. It was the closest match they had ever found. And so they assumed Arthur Lee Allen wrote the posters. And there's a scene where Gyllenhaal goes to interview the guy who owned the theater and talk to him, and mentions that. And the guy who owned the theater says, "Oh no, that's my handwriting." So
that was creepy. That was some creepy shit right there.
Yeah. So now you've got a guy who's on the peripheral of the whole investigation, who his handwriting matches it perfectly. Well, so who the fuck knows, man?
I want to weigh in on that handwriting thing. We all come from a time where you had a handwriting class, and you copied the letter and wrote on that graph paper with the lines, the lowercase and uppercase.
Kids, back in the old days, we didn't text. We had to write letters. And now when you sign your name and it's just a bunch of scribble like I do, that wouldn't fly back then because people actually had to read what you were writing. And if you wanted to write fast, you write in this thing called cursive. And that's what old Silky's referring to. It's back when we had we crossed the country in wagons and shit.
All right. So before I was so rudely interrupted, the block letters.
Go ahead.
The block letters, generational. It was a generation of handwriting. So it would be very easy if you do everything in the block letters, that might look like, 200 people out there with their block letters.
I don't think so. People have their own handwriting back then, but does he bring that up in the book?
Yeah, and the way he's writing, this is block letter. This guy wrote in a way to mask his own handwriting, and he misspelled things. He did things to mislead, where this guy's kind of an idiot. He
always spelled Christmas with two S's.
He was spelling shit left and right wrong to distance who he was from. So you can't even trust the handwriting. He's purposely writing it a certain way so that, that's not my handwriting. But a lot of those postcards are block letters that anyone can write that way, so it's hard to, I just don't like when I watch that movie, I'm like, well, they're block letters, it's not.
I would say this, for better or worse, in this day and age, are a lot of people convicted on that kind of thing anymore? Given the benefit of the doubt, that is tough. If I held the pen ink side out like this and wrote, and I only did that to send letters to the San Francisco Chronicle,
sure.
I don't know a jury's going to convict on that. Right?
But at the time, that's all they had. That's the only way they could. But, so now
we live in
it's a different world with DNA, that's for sure.
Now it's DNA. It's
we now live in a time when a certain somebody had his ex-wife's blood all over him in his car and he got off.
Yeah.
So I don't know. They weren't going to convict him on
who was this?
OJ.
OJ.
Oh, OJ.
Okay.
Were you serious, Snags?
I don't. It's been a while. A lot of people kill. There's a lot of stories about people killing their wives in the news. So I don't know.
That's true.
So the other thing I was going to point out, he started a fanzine in the I think the early 60s about Lord of the Rings and
Hobbitalia.
Yeah, and his whole thing in there was all these runes, these ciphers that he made up that were his own. and I don't know enough about ciphers. He gets really into it in the second book about ciphers, and I would have to have somebody show me, because you're reading it and he kind of loses you. He gets really into telling you how this guy came up with these ciphers. And, if I make up my own alphabet and then apply that to what I'm writing, only I know which thing correlates with an actual alphabet letter,
That's the point of a cipher.
Right. So this guy, Paul Dewar, is another one who did work for the military. So there's that. You can check that off.
Both of these suspects worked for the military. Was he in coding and encryption?
Yes. Yeah.
So they were both skilled at basically trying to decipher spy codes and stuff.
Yeah.
So.
But this guy was just obsessed with it. But so I'm at the end of everything I kind of wrote in relation to that first book. You've talked about the movie. Let's have our guest run down book 2. And
sure. Well, I would just say this first. I read when I was fairly, teenager, the first book by Graysmith, which I'd never even heard of Zodiac. I think a lot of us, I think all three of us are readers. How many times have we bought books just because of the cover? And I remember buying a used copy of it, just being obsessed with it. I don't think Robert Graysmith, even to this point, has done anything wrong. And I think even Jarrett Kobach, the author of the 2 recent books, really goes out of his way to kind of say that. He doesn't bash Graysmith. He doesn't bash any of the cops. He really says, I only was able to do what I did because of the internet. But I don't think Graysmith did anything wrong. And frankly, he's, for a cartoonist, I think a compelling author. Did a good job. And I would also say, Snags talked about the movie. I would say that's one of the better movies of the 21st century so far. I'm a David Fincher fan, and I would make it one of his top 4 or 5 films for sure. All the acting's great. If you're listening to this and haven't seen it, because it is back from 2007, which just blows my mind, an excellent film. Really good acting all the way around. And just well done, and genuinely creepy without ever being really grotesque or bloody. I would argue one of the better suspense films in a long time, because he doesn't. It's never gross, but it's just those few moments.
They definitely, especially John Carroll Lynch, his portrayal of Arthur Lee Allen, fucking oozes creepy, man.
And that guy's a great actor anyway. He just does different stuff all the time. There's a scene, the scene that Snags referred to, he's in the basement of this theater manager's house. And when he goes, well, I wrote that poster. I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal's reaction is like, I could be in the basement.
Time to go.
With a murder.
Time to go.
Wife's calling.
Yeah.
So it's a good movie.
And a great soundtrack. We did do a playlist for this episode, kind of based around the soundtrack to the movie. I made some executive decisions. You will not hear Steely Dan by my choice.
Yeah.
Steely Dan has been banned, and a lot of other stuff has been added.
I think Steely Dan is to music what Michael J. Fox is to Standing Still. Not great for me. Like one of the better, more overrated bands, maybe.
Yeah.
Hey, hold my beer, Mike. Oh, actually, let me get that back from you. Just a minute.
No, I'm sorry. Well, and I don't want to disparage Michael J. Fox. We all love him, and fortunately, he's done well. He's he's working now at Spago's. If you order a Caesar salad, he comes and asks you if you need more cheese.
I heard he's got a music. I heard he's got a music single out. He covered Whole Lot of Shaking Going On.
Oh, yeah. A new, current.
Current version.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But I do want to break into the second book, and I want to credit old Silky. We share books a lot, what we're reading, what we're into. He hit me to these, and I'm such a Zodiac freak anyway. I went and bought them both immediately. And I read quickly, but I tend to read several books at once. I read both books, which I think are probably close to 550, 600 pages. I think in like 5 days. I really found myself up late at night with work to get to in the morning, just couldn't put them down. Into the second book, he gets into specifically Paul Dewar, and I think Silky made the point. He tries to disprove this theory throughout that book, but it is a lot of coincidences.
Yes, that's where he kept
glaring evidence.
That's where he kept me solid, where he just kept saying, I don't want to have found the guy. It's, but what we have to point out is somebody mentions to him that these letters sound almost like the fanzine letters, and he starts looking at fanzines and then just falls down a wormhole of fanzines. And he points out in the books that there's no possible way the sharpest detective out there would not have been able, in 1968, 1969, you would not have connected the dots that he was able to do in the 2000s with the internet.
No way.
You would not have been able to track down some periodical that had 200 copies in Ohio from.
It would, with the internet now, it would take a detective, I would wager to say, easily a month of 50-hour weeks to do what someone can do on the internet now in an afternoon. It's literally a matter of driving and footwork versus sitting on your butt and punching keys.
Back before the internet, we had to go do stuff. We had to go to libraries and look shit up in books.
Well, you didn't have a tablet.
A quick digression, with very few exceptions, what's a great detective series that's been created in novel form or television movie since the internet?
Bosch.
Bosch is good, but Bosch is actually based, those books are pre-internet mostly. Certainly the character is, because I'll tell you what, there's going to be nothing more boring than watching Tom Selleck or James Garner at a fucking keyboard for an hour. That's boring, but that's what they do now, I'm sure, mostly. But let me get into some of this stuff from the second book. So we're talking about Paul Alfred Dewar. Frankly, matches physical descriptions of some survivors and eyewitnesses. He was 42 in 1969. The Zodiac was said to be, by witnesses and survivors, 35 to 45 roughly. He wore glasses off and on throughout his life, and shaved and carried himself shaved and unshaven throughout life. That was per his daughter. I'll get into that interview later. His weight fluctuated, but he was generally kind of stocky, again, per his witnesses and his daughter. He wrote to the media and authorities, as we know, the Zodiac did. So Dewar wrote constantly in the fanzines and even published his own, as Silky mentioned. I want to get back into that a little bit.
He sent stuff to newspapers.
For sure.
He blew up editors constantly.
I did some more research on fanzines. That really started with guys like Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard, a lot of their contemporaries. They were by no means famous in their day. They were not wealthy by any means. Many of their readers probably made more money doing day-to-day jobs than they did writing for magazines. Mm-hmm. And they would really respond to fan letters like friends, because they were just thrilled somebody was reading it. Even back then, if you wrote Humphrey Bogart, he never saw it. I mean, he didn't give a shit. But these guys were barely making a living writing, if at all. And when they saw any interest in it, they loved it. And that kind of started that. And I don't think what happened too was fans started then just to correspond together. And somebody got the idea to say, what if we get a mailing list together and we put together this little pamphlet of our letters, and once in a while they could get a response letter from somebody like H.P. Lovecraft or Robert E. Howard.
Right. And you would you could make hey, send $1 and I'll send you, sure. And you're hoping that 500 people send you $1.
Sure. And then of course,
we have to pause and mention the time when Silky and I were around 18. and we were looking for jobs.
We were going to make millions.
We found this ad in the newspaper. It said,
work at your own pace.
Work at your own pace. Send $25 in, and
was it that much?
It was something like that. Yeah, get the secret on how to make thousands of dollars a week or something like that. So we were like, seriously believed this was gonna work. We sent the $25 in, and we spent the next few days ragging on our roommate.
And we're gonna make millions.
Was named Mike, by the way. Basically saying, "Hey, you're going in slaving at the pizza joint. We're gonna be sitting here chilling. We're gonna make money stuffing envelopes. You should have chipped in on that $25 with us. Yeah. You're such a fool." We get this letter in the mail. Says, "Here's how you make money stuffing envelopes. You place an ad in the newspaper. You say, make money stuffing envelopes. Charge $25.
Yeah, dude, and whatever they promised, so it's too many years. Whatever they promised, we did the math on the envelopes and we're like, oh, so they're expected, like it was just such a scam.
It was hilarious.
We were young enough, naive enough. We
totally thought we had it made. We thought we had it figured out.
How much did you guys spend on that?
He's saying 25. It was some at the time we didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. So
no, that was like when we would go to the grocery store and just buy ramen noodles only because we had $2.75.
There might be a sale, a can of baked beans, and we're like, oh my god, we could put these in Ziploc bags and heated and we could eat for 4 days.
Well, I will say, hearing it now for the first time, I'd say it was well worth it, but I didn't pay anything, so I'm biased. That's a great story. That's hilarious.
Oh. Yeah.
So anyway, go back to.
I'm really proud of this, guys. I did a great deal of research on this. I kind of went all out, and I got some stuff that is not in Kovac's book.
Well, let's run with it, man.
Lay it on us.
Both Dewar and the Zodiac had written in the newspapers. Dewar also had just, for many years, been writing and creating his own fanzines. To get back to the comic book connection, which is going to come up in a big way, pretty early on in comic books, they were printing letters in the back. Basically, they would say, hey, just put your permission to print it. So it was a way for them to fill a page or two, which is a big deal back then, even now. Comic books, even now, of course, now you email it in, but you can get your comments and stuff printed in the back of Amazing Spider-Man or the Justice League of America or whatever.
Absolutely.
And it was a big deal back then. And of course, you can imagine being a young man or even a kid. Can you imagine buying the next issue of The Flash or Green Lantern and your letters in there? That's crazy.
Yeah.
And they were always pretty popular too, because I think they would often, for every 3 positive letters, there would be a letter saying, this issue of Wonder Woman sucked. I'm never going to buy your comics again. And which was kind of funny. And it's so popular, they have actually reprinted some of these letters in collected editions.
Those golden age of like DC, I had the hardbacks, and those you'd have all of your the DC characters, and you had some of those letters, and it was cool as shit to be like, dude, where is this guy that's writing this? How old what? It was really cool.
And I think fanzines jumped off from that. They got, and somebody wrote, hey, man, I saw your letter in this issue's Tales of the Crypt. And that's cool. We're into the same stuff. There was no internet. And these have always been, myself included, kind of solitary people in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So to connect, the best way to connect with me, if you're a stranger, if you're in the comics, we just have this shared language immediately. But now it's, through the mail. So that was a big deal. Very similar writing styles, and it's hard to display in the podcast. If you get Kovac's books, and I don't know him, I'm not plugging him, but they're great books. There's a lot of examples of Paul Dewar's writing style and dialogue and verbiage in the book, because it's online now, and he looked them up and printed them. There's a lot of similar talk, in my opinion.
Cadence and phrasings that are in those postcards. It's creepy.
Sure. There are literally examples, specifically in Dewar's self-published fanzine about Lord of the Rings called Habitalia, where he had a cipher in there, quoted and published, they think, within 3 days of one of the letters of the Chronicle. He was in that mindset. Later on, they both had published, this isn't so close in terms of time, but there's examples of Dewar having letters in a fanzine describing building a bomb that are almost identical to Zodiac's much earlier on.
Yeah,
they left out the same part of how to make a starter. Almost like he was smart enough, if they could track this back to me and I literally wrote a recipe for a bomb, am I an accomplice almost in his head? So both Zodiac and later on Dewar leave out the part of the formula for a starter.
But he references the Amphro, which was not common knowledge then.
What's Amphro?
It's the fertilizer being a bomb.
Wow.
And he references specifically this Amphro, and the way he words it, you would have had a few people in the military that knew that, but it was not common knowledge. So that's another huge red flag that this guy's literally quoting what was quoted in one of the postcards.
That's pretty wacky. Next, Dewar was definitely known by his daughter and other people who knew him, a big Renaissance fairs guy. There's even pictures that I don't know if Kobek found on his own or the daughter gave him, but they're in the book of him dressed like a archer with a sword on his hip. Dewar,
he's got that chest insignia.
Sure, and
it has the Zodiac. It has the Zodiac symbol.
Circle thing. Yeah.
Well, Brian Hartnell, one of the survivor of the Lake Berryessa murders, described it more what he thought would be like an executioner's costume. It had the hood, the symbol. He had like a rope and a knife and all this. Well, that murder and the gentleman who survived that attack, that happened within a couple miles of the Renaissance fair that weekend. And what blows me away about that, I don't believe Graysmith ever referenced that. So again, I'm not suggesting he did anything wrong. I'm saying, per the research available in that era, who would have thought that mattered?
How would you know? Yeah.
You know. Next, later on in the 70s, Dewar is quoted in some fanzines implying that he had killed before.
Yeah, that he took care of some people.
Right. He was, again, per his daughter, somewhat physically abusive to her and her mother. And I'm going to get into the veracity of that later. Just let me get through a little bit of this. He was reportedly discharged for the military with violence against another enlisted man. Next, though, the zines thing was pretty crazy. He also talked about a lot of weapons over the years in zines. And we're going to get into this in just a minute. Later on in the 70s, Dewar got himself registered as an investigator in the state of California. He dedicated a fanzine to serial killers, but having lived his whole life, or most of his life, in that region where the Zodiac at that time, maybe only overshadowed by Manson in terms of notoriety in the Manson family, never mentions the Zodiac in that fanzine.
Did he mention the Golden State Killer, because that was in Vallejo? And
I believe so. Yes.
Wow.
There's another one, and this is where we get into the comic book thing, which is right up my alley. And this is one of the things Kobek discovered through the fanzines. And let me get into this. So, and I'll have to get into a little bit deep some comic history. So in the 50s, most comic companies really shifted away from the superhero thing. It got very popular, just like films and television, westerns, romance, crime, and supernatural horror. Certainly there were some superheroes always published, Superman, Batman, maybe Wonder Woman, but it was narrow. It was definitely more war comics, westerns.
Yeah, your Justice League characters kind of faded, right?
Very much so. Very much so. So 1952, Tim Holt number 30 is published. Tim Holt was an actor from the silent era, big Western hero, just into the talkies a little bit. They also think collecting was pretty rare back then. I would tend to agree with that. I think very commonly, kids and adults, and I want to hit on this real quick. In the 50s, you had a lot of adults buying comics. GIs in the 40s bought a lot of comic books. And that habit, as most habits, continue. So adults and kids, mostly males, of course, would be like, hey, I just read Tim Holt number 28. And, oh, man, that's cool. I just read Red Rider number 15. And they would trade. They had no notion they'd be popular or worth anything, just like baseball cards. We probably all know the legend that kids for years would put baseball cards in their spokes. And that's why Mickey Mantle cards are so expensive, because most of them were torn up and left on the street somewhere. It was not. So I think there was some collecting. If there was collecting, it was from a fan level, no notion of further value.
Well, I can remember in the mid to late 70s being up in one of these antique shops, and just a stack of comics that had been in the same box for 20, 30 years. They were a whole stack of Classics Illustrated comics. And they were yellowed on the edges, but, you know, the covers were pretty good. But they just gave it. They were like, oh, here, $5, you know. They weren't.
So to nerd out a little bit, in terms of collecting, I'm going to show you one here. I brought props. I'm sorry, it's not visual. This is what we call a bag and a board in the comic book world. You buy them separately and put them together yourself. That was officially starting to be produced not until 1976. So we are talking about a time before anyone really thought these might be valuable, and or they cared enough to care for them better. I grew up in the 80s, and I can remember rolling up an Amazing Spider-Man and putting it in my back pocket. So we're talking about the 40s and 50s. Here's what's really wild to me. I did some serious research. In 1945 to 1952-53, approximately 25 million comic books were sold every month in this country.
Okay.
Now, this is not an exact number, obviously, but they said it was about 100, on average, 100 different intellectual properties.
Okay.
So I just did the math and divided. That's 250,000 copies per issue of comic book. Now, that's not exact, because let's be clear. Sales is sales. If such and such was selling more, that might have had 350,000, whereas something else had 180,000.
And that's nationwide that you're talking.
That is the continental United States per my research. Now, I couldn't find out, unfortunately, how many copies of Tim Holt number 30 were sold. And we'll get to why Tim Holt number 30 is so important. In 1954, a psychologist who wanted to make himself very famous wrote a book called Seduction of the Innocent, which is about how comic books were the scourge of our society. And for a couple of years there were thousands of comic book burnings across the country.
Right.
And that is why that era of comic book can be valuable. They can be very rare. They were just out and out purposely destroyed. So Tim Holt comes out, as I said, 1952. The reason it's important is the cover, which I've sent you in Snags and Silky, is beautifully drawn, and it's a bodacious woman with a cowboy who I believe was the hero of the book. He is tied up in a chair, and it mentions death by fire, death by gun, death by knife, death by rope. That is a direct quote in one of the Zodiac's letters,
and written the same way that it's
just bizarre.
Yeah.
And that to me is truly an unbelievable coincidence. We know this guy was into fanzines, he was into comics, he was into sci-fi and fantasy. That's really bizarre.
What's bizarre is that anyone else saw that and correlated it back to this obscure comic.
Right.
You know?
Well, and I'm going to get to that, and I'm about to blow both your mind, because I discovered this on my own the other day.
Okay.
Not in Kobek's book, I don't think. But again, let me just say that's got to be pretty rare. And to remember that in the late 60s, early 70s, this whoever it was, doer or not, I'm convinced had a copy of that comic book.
Yeah.
So check this out. According to CGC, who is the main company that will grade comic books.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this on other podcasts. They put them in a big thing of plastic. They give you a grade on it, 1 through 10 or 0 through 10, who wrote it, etc. According to CGC, as of 2 days ago, there are 21 graded by them in the world.
Dag, yeah.
There's another company. There's another company that does grade comics, and I couldn't find their stats. But even if you doubled it, it's 42
of that comic.
Yes. Now that doesn't mean there's no raw copies, but those are low numbers.
That's ridiculous.
Snags, I'm sorry.
I yawned.
Sorry. Oh, I thought you were saying. So
it's been a long, crazy day.
Check this out. And this, I believe, is an effective Kobek's book. On eBay right now, the only copy of that is a 4.5, which is out of a 10 score. They want $4,750 for this thing. There's no way anybody wanted that before the Zodiac connection.
No.
It's too obscure.
That's a pretty specific number.
Yeah,
but that's another reason Kobek says if you have that comic book, you are the Zodiac killer.
It's pretty crazy.
Or you're a suspect.
Right.
I mean,
that fucker on eBay, we need to track his ass down. That's probably the killer.
Paul Dewar had comic books, so it's like here's another connection.
So, did either one of you get a chance to look at that comic I sent you, Unexpected 111?
Yeah.
Okay. Very similar theme.
Yeah.
As the Tim Holt. It's a wheel of death. There's a knife, a gun, and a rope. I don't know if there's fire on there. It might be behind one of the other characters. So
no, it's just smoke and a guy running away from the wheel and a witch looming over the top of it.
Would you argue extremely similar cover?
Yes.
Okay. Unexpected number 111 was published and on newsstands 12/5/1968. The first known Zodiac murders are 12/20/68.
Dag, yo. That's hardcore.
Now, one would argue, and I can speak as a lifetime comic nerd, he probably always was reading comics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it gets a little crazy with that. That kind of blows me away. Like I said, I kind of discovered that by accident the other day. And I skipped some notes that I think are compelling. The Halloween card, what Brett and I are referencing, the Halloween card Zodiac sent on 10/27/70 says he's going to kill people and then, quote, by fire, by gun, by knife, by rope.
That's exactly what's on the wheel.
That's a little weird. That's directly from the Tim Holt cover. Yeah. That's very weird. Another thing was, we know he was just really into this stuff. This is a Dewar quote from a fanzine. Several tries have been made at an international San Francisco organization. A sci-fi organization, and I hope one succeeds. I'd like to join. So he was one of these guys starting the early convention movement, wanting to be involved. Yeah. He was definitely into this stuff.
He wanted an audience.
Really started happening in New York in the early to mid 70s. So that's right in his wheelhouse as far as time goes.
Yeah.
I just think it's an awful lot for me.
He really wanted an audience, and this fanzine thing gave him the anonymity to be, attractive and muscular and all that behind a letter that he would send out and present himself as well-read and knowledgeable and an authority. And people would write back, and it fed him. It fed his ego to some extent.
Hey, Mike, if you're going to kiss, turn off the sound.
No, I'm going to kill my dog who's barking.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
All right.
I'm gonna
we haven't heard him.
For 1 second, guys. Sorry.
Yeah. Killing dogs is a gateway to becoming a serial killer.
Yes,
I think so.
I'll be right back.
Yeah. So he's going to drain the weasel. So Silky, have you tell us about the interview with the daughter with Paul Dewar's daughter? You said that was published, I guess, after the books.
Yeah, it was in a magazine, and now Mike may come back on and talk about that.
Yeah,
but
you can jump into it. Why don't you hip us to a little preview?
She just bizarrely, I'm reading the second book. I'm closing in on the end of it, and there is a bit towards the end where he gets really into the Decipher thing, and he was starting to lose me, but I soldiered through it because it was very interesting.
Right.
The thing with the fanzines too is the daughter talks about that December of 68. She had done something. She was a little girl, and he threw her up the stairs. So he picked her up and threw her up the stairs, and the way she hit caused bleeding somehow. Was a little girl, you just like, God damn, dude. But he threw her up the stairs, and then rather than storm out, like he stormed out, and what it sounds like is she at the time, so in 68 she would have been a teenager. She had done something, and rather than kill his daughter, he's like getting more and more physical with her, and the wife's like, or he's attacking the wife, and the daughter said, "Dad, what do you do?" He comes to his senses and storms out, and it's just very, in her memory, she's like, that would have been right around Christmas time in 68. So it's just another kind of, wow, he stormed out pissed off. Maybe he drove up the street and killed two kids parked off the side of the road. In his anger, in his own way, he's killing his daughter symbolically because she was doing teenager shit.
Interesting theory.
But it just connects. And then the other murders that occurred, the daughter was weighing in on, wow, that would have been July of 69. Me and Mom had gone off to somewhere, and Dad was home by himself. And you're just like, oh shit. Then the Lake Berryessa. Oh, Dad was all excited about going to a Renaissance fair, and you'd like, oh, wow. There's some creepy connections.
Yeah, interesting.
So, Mike, I was just kind of touched a little bit on the daughter.
No, and here's where I want to get into, and I think Jared talked about this in the books. Let's be real fair to everybody involved. So the witness in Graysmith's book, one of the victims who survived, was it Mike Bugeaud?
Yes.
In real life, he apparently did identify Arthur Lee Allen. I think this was how many years in between, Brett? 15, 18 years in between the attack and his identifying him?
More than 20. Well, when did the attack happen? Because he identified him in the early 90s, I think.
Okay, so 25, 30 years, let's say.
Yeah. So
here's a guy who's been victimized and traumatized horribly. I don't even want to begin to imagine. Is he looking to put this behind him psychologically? Not lying, looking to put it behind him.
Yeah, and that was the murder, or that was the first one. He had a flashlight in his face. So how are you going to see anybody?
There you go.
Well, it was daylight out. I mean, the movie,
the attack happened at night.
Oh,
that's it.
That was the other guy. Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
That's the guy that jumped in the back seat, and that's what saved him.
Right.
Now, and let's go to the daughter, just for the sake of argument. Maybe her dad was abusive. Maybe he was about the right age. Maybe they lived in the right area. She didn't like her dad, and this guy comes along and she says, "Well, I'll throw this dad," and that happens. We know that happens in life. As a quick example, I don't know why. The other day I was reading about Bing Crosby, and a couple of his kids said he used to beat them all up, and another kid said he never touched us. So who knows what the truth is?
Yeah.
So let's put some benefit of the doubt in all of it. And I'll even go to me. Maybe I'm reading this book and just want to believe I'm on the cusp of something new and exciting, and I buy into it psychologically.
Sure. Well, it goes back
without meaning to. That doesn't change some of the facts involved. Yeah. And while I think Arthur Lee Allen is probably still a decent suspect, I'll say two things about that. One, is there a big, as far as we know, do pedophiles often range into murdering adults? I don't know. I don't know how common that is, but the stuff with the fanzines, that comic book, I just think it's too much coincidence for me.
Yeah.
It's not all serial killers kill 100 people, guys.
Yeah.
Some of them kill a few. Maybe that thing with the cabbie really actually rattled him.
I think he left some serious evidence in that cab and knew it and got out of there sloppy, barely, and other people have done it. The Golden State Killer had a couple murder scenes that got out of hand, and oh shit, I gotta, anyway, Paul Dewar kept mentioning in these fanzines that he wanted to buy some land in Northern California. He wanted to get away, get out, get up into kind of that survivalist thing. And he apparently, and this is just, I didn't know about this, but he says that, while there's these second chance things for men getting out of prison, hey, come work a farm or whatever. He went on a fanzine or wherever he mailed this stuff. Hey, ladies, if you're getting out of prison or falling on hard times and need to get away, I've got a nice little stretch of land with a nice little cabin. I'll meet you and take you up into the mountains, and you can stay as long as you want. And I'm thinking, God help the dumb bitch that went up there.
And by the way,
who's going to hear you?
Maybe he did kill more
people.
This
is before Google reviews, so you couldn't look up the Google review on the ranch.
Yeah, dude.
Exactly. And maybe he just said, hey, this is working out pretty well.
That's terrifying because
I'm banging and whacking three strange.
Who's gonna know?
I don't want to write any more letters.
I do have to
know.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the possibilities. How many people did he take up into the woods? And it was happening all the time. The Hillside Stranglers, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy. They were killing all over California.
This is all very similar to something that happened to my wife and I a month or so ago. It's a rainy night. There's a mechanic near my work. So she had her car there and borrowed my car during the day. She picks me up from work. We go back to the mechanic, pick up her car. It's raining, pouring, dark and cold. We're just looking for a quick place to eat. And I fire up Google Maps. There's a Thai place nearby. We're like, we'll go there. We go there. We get there. We walk in. It's completely empty, right? So it's already spooking us out a little bit. It's a Friday night, and it's completely empty. And we sit down, and we order our food. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, and the guy goes off to get the food made, and I'm like, I might as well. And here's where Google reviews would have helped some of these women not get murdered in the mountains. I fire up Google reviews, and the second or third review I see is a picture of a plate about 60% eaten with 2 roaches in it. These people discovered the roaches mixed in with their food after they'd eaten 60% of it. It was horrifying as any murder scene. I'm telling you, we got the hell out of there.
You're lucky to be alive.
Yeah.
Lucky to be alive.
True story.
But I'm haunted by.
Well, no, I want to dig into that a little bit. Can you imagine the Post if that was around back then? This guy's taking me from behind by force, and he's got a knife to my throat. No stars for this motherfucker.
Yeah. I'm giving you a negative.
I do not recommend. If I could give 0 stars, I would.
Yeah, I was strangled and thrown half dead in a crawl space. I'm giving a negative review. My neck is still fucked up.
1.5 stars, and that's only for the conviction. You know,
but just the possibility
crazy.
that, in this he shows or discusses these letters, and then you've got no evidence of him ever actually having got anyone up to that place, but Jarrett Kobek goes up to this dilapidated cabin that Dewar had up there, and there are no amenities. There's no bathroom. There's no sink. He says in the book, God help the girl that came up there because she didn't leave.
Yep. And like I said, I think it's highly likely. Hey, let's put it this way. He might not have been the Zodiac killer.
But I think he was definitely.
That he might have got a couple girls to come up there.
Yeah, I think he was on the same bowling team.
Nowadays, they got Tinder. It's just, but back then you put an ad in the newspaper and say, hey, come up to my mysterious cabin in the woods. That was Tinder, I guess.
There's just the possibility that he had over 2 or 3 years, 50 women respond and meet him at a bus station or something. I mean,
who's going to be stupid enough to answer that ad, though? Even back then, when you had a lot of dumb hippies.
Snag, I was going to say, who ended up on Spawn Ranch?
Yeah,
for God's sake,
dude. The level of idiocy that I see every day at work, I really wonder how some people find the airport.
Yeah,
but they manage it. And I mean, it's just, think about the women who end up in Mike Tyson's hotel at 3 a.m.
Right, but he's rich and famous, and
that's different. That's rich.
That's not an ad in the back of a newspaper from some anonymous guy saying, "Hey, come up to my ranch in the middle of the woods."
Sir,
it'll be a blast.
Iron Mike disparage. Yes or no?
Say it again.
I will not have Iron Mike Tyson disparage.
Yeah, we'll have none of that.
Yeah. Come on now.
That's that. I don't know that. We'll segue a little bit into this.
Well, I'm just saying there are some idiots out there.
I went up to Harvey Weinstein's hotel room at 3 a.m.
Yeah,
we had to talk about my part as the screaming woman
at 3 a.m.
5 of NATO.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Okay.
He's rich, he's famous, you're going into his hotel, but I don't know. It doesn't excuse any of that stuff, of course.
I didn't say it excused it, but the stupidity.
No, but I mean, you can put yourself in these situations.
I'm just trying to see why I am myself from, but it's just
horribly trusting.
Once on Seinfeld, George Costanza says, coffee after 10 p.m. doesn't mean coffee.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So those letters out to, hey, if you're a woman on hard times, even if you're getting out and you've got your daughter with you, you guys can come up and stay as long. And you're like, oh my God, it was so creepy.
But by the way, this is an innocent era before we're thinking now of men of our generation.
Sure.
Right? Sure.
Yeah, this is people just well, let me go up and see how it looks.
You bet. Am I wrong? Snags is laughing at me.
No, I'm just laughing about how just idiotic it would be to do that. But yeah, I mean, there's some whacked out hippies that did all kinds of shit. I was raised by them, and so was Silky, so we know what they're capable of.
Oh yeah, no, I
was raised by two people who had Ronald Reagan tattooed on their chest, so it was. That
was different.
Totally different.
Very different.
I would venture to say Snags and I both were in these nature cult weirdo places, and even at our tender ages we're able to look around. I know I did, and I thought I should not be here.
Because I think I even came up a little bit before that paranoia kicked in. If I can mention Adam Walsh, there was a time when Walsh in the 80s, I still had a lot of freedom, but it was my mom wanted me to check in more.
I think Adam Walsh saved a lot of kids.
And
absolutely,
I feel guilty about this, but my daughter doesn't nearly have the runaround of the town that I did. When I was
my son doesn't go to the mailbox alone. You know,
when I got my first real BMX, I might as well have had a helicopter. I could go wherever the hell I want.
In the summer, when there was no school, you would leave in the morning and do whatever. Go to the mall and fuck around all day. We'd go walking in creeks for miles.
There's a really good article.
Never ask what you're doing. You just be like, I'll be home for dinner, and you'd see them 8 hours later. No cell phone, no pager, no nothing.
Nope.
It was crazy.
And they weren't worried about you until the lights were on in the street and your ass wasn't in the house.
Dude, that is so funny. That was the rule. If the lights are on the street,
I'll tell you this.
Inside.
I read this amazing article that talked about the diameter around a child's home. And it was one of those things you start reading it, you don't think you're going to finish it. And it was so well written. I read the entire article that kids, like Snags said, get up, crack of dawn, get out of the house. I would try to leave the house before my mom woke up.
Sure.
And then we'd be gone all day, but the radius around the house, we might be in that article, it said kids would go up to 15 miles away from their house, and it would just all be riding the bike, doing whatever. And I remember
we would go throw rocks at cars.
Well,
I mean,
I've got one story. We rode probably 3-4 miles. It was a good bike ride. In my mind, it's like Stand By Me, where the kids just walk forever to see a dead body. We rode our bikes because this kid's uncle had a pool table, and it was like 10 a.m. Oh, my uncle's got a pool table. Well, now we're riding and we're just following this kid, and we get to that uncle's house, and we walk in, and it turned out that somebody related, or somebody that knew the kid, said, "Oh my God, look at all these boys here. Hey, I have to get a dresser in Pennsylvania," and so for shits and giggles, we all jump in the truck with this guy, and he drove us into another state to help him load this dresser.
It's insane.
Also,
we got to shout out El Condor.
I was going to say, did I just spot El Condor?
Hello.
What up, El Condor?
Yell Zodiac is whack. Go ahead.
What is that supposed
to
mean?
Just say it.
No, that's weird.
Come on, just say
Hi.
Say it.
Say Zodiac is
whack.
Is a jerk.
Are you happy now, Mr.
Zodiac is a jerk.
Thank you, sir.
El Condor.
All right.
El Condor, do me a favor.
I'm done tomorrow.
Hey, you're being talked to.
What?
Go ahead. Come back.
What?
El Condor, do me a favor.
Stand up.
Before you go to bed tonight, hit your knees and thank Crom. You look like your mother.
Nice.
What?
Yeah,
all good. That's all good.
What is that?
You don't want to end up looking like this bald troll.
Did you get a bath? Did you get a bath?
Are you talking to El Condor or Mrs. Silky?
No. The boy. I'm always worried. I want to sound like a good parent.
My mom hasn't found out that I haven't had a bath yet.
Go take a bath.
Now we know. That's great.
Do not tell her.
Okay.
I swear.
So
she doesn't listen to the podcast, so I think you're safe.
We rode into another state to pick up a dresser.
That's insane, dude.
And we load this thing up. It's massive. And the whole time, as a 12-year-old, I'm like, man, I'm in another state.
And your mom had no clue.
No clue where I was.
That's crazy.
Nothing. And so you get home, like they fed us and everything. They were so happy that we'd helped load this massive thing. And maybe it was massive, but there were like 5 of us. So we all, and this guy loaded this thing up. And then, fed us. I get home and my mom's like, "What'd you do today?" And you're like, I don't know, because it's like this list of all these places. Little did she know I'd been 200 miles that day, you know.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And by the way, 9 times out of 10, it would have worked out fine. They literally were like, oh, let's get these kids to help us. They were good people. They weren't looking to hurt anybody. But it's that 1%, and you're on a milk carton.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you're hey, go down this tunnel. I left a soccer ball down there. Just go down there. And next thing you know, you're on a plane to Cocaine Island.
Yeah. And it's not a creepy metaphysical clown. It's just some pervert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dr. Jellyfinger and some Twizzlers. It's awful, dude.
Yeah. Well, back when you were a kid, it might have been Joe Biden, but that's another story.
Yes.
That's another podcast.
But yeah, so that's the Zodiac kids. I got nothing else.
Can I throw in a quick aside?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
lay it on us.
The Most Dangerous Game was mentioned, and I believe it's based on a short story. But real quick point: this is a really good movie, gang. It stars Fay Wray. It's actually a really fun, well done film. It was filmed at night when the set for King Kong would shut down.
Yep.
Oh wow!
So this is a quick made, off the cuff film, and it really holds up. It tells a great story.
Is Bela Lugosi in that?
He is not. Fay Wray is really the only person from it who matters at all.
She was working double time. She did the King Kong during the day and then shot this at night. Wow.
Absolutely. It is very, very well done and a fun movie. And that's all I wanted to say. I think this was a great podcast. Just keep an open mind. We never know, no one will ever really solve this, but I think the books are really enjoyable.
Well, Mike and I both have weighed in on just how amazing these two books are by Jared Kobeck. And we're like, okay, why has the sky not split open? Why are we not hearing more about these two books? I mean, this guy has all but solved it in my mind.
Well, it's kind of like that book that you were alluding to about the Kennedy assassination in the beginning that the De Niro movie was based on. You remember the name of that book?
So You Paint Houses. So this
is a hitman who basically testifies he was basically involved in shipping the guns down to Dallas and lays out the whole motivation for the mob to take him out. And yet it's still debated and people are still obsessed with it. So you could have a silver bullet kind of thing, but there's enough uncertainty around it,
With So You Paint Houses, the fact when they went into how dangerous Jimmy Hoffa was and how Bobby Kennedy just relentlessly went after him, just tooth and nail, where you're like, okay, I mean, and they make that point that Bobby Kennedy's the person that got his brother killed.
Well,
and you're like, oh,
Bobby didn't help, but Jack sleeping with one of Carlos Santraficante's girlfriends probably didn't help.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that conversation?
Well,
did you just get this cocksucker elected? He's banging my broad?
Their pops. For those of you that don't know, their pops, Joe Kennedy, was a gangster.
Yeah,
he was a prohibition.
Isn't that a scene in Goodfellas that De Niro's? I want him dead. I want him dead.
But the deal is
that's not in Goodfellas.
Raging Bull.
The deal is though the mob thought they were getting one of their guys in the White House, and that's why they helped him steal Illinois, and when Nixon won that election just barely, but they stole enough votes and stuffed enough ballot boxes in Illinois. They get Kennedy in the White House. They think this is Joe's kid. We got our person in the White House now, and Bobby Kennedy is probably in his mind so embarrassed about his past that he just starts viciously going after these guys.
It was a really dumb thing to do based on the family,
not a smart thing to do. Yeah.
Based on the family history and but anyway.
But to my point,
that's another episode that we're probably not going to do.
I don't like it.
I believe all that, though. Obviously, the limousine President Kennedy was killed in was all shot up. Do you know who pressured them to get that fixed right quick? Joe Kennedy. Because he was such a cold piece of garbage. His first thought was, well, I could get Bobby or Teddy in the White House. So we got to cover this up quick.
Oh, so Joe Kennedy was like, let's sweep.
They got that car cleaned up before anyone could look at it and realize where those bullets were coming from.
Yeah. That's crazy, wacky. I actually was in Dallas, probably, I don't know, 10 years ago, something like that. A little.
I've heard Dealey Plaza is really tiny.
It's really tiny, and there was a obsessed nutso boingo dude on the corner, wild-eyed, and he would see people coming by and looking at the grassy knoll. He saw us, as me, my wife, and I think her cousin who lived over there, and we're looking at the grassy knoll and pointing at the book depository, and he got all wild-eyed, and you could tell he really wanted to start ranting to us about the whole thing. And he came out, he was like coming over to rant to us, and we kind of, I'll see you later.
Yeah.
We're just checking it out. We're not spending our whole lives obsessed about it like you are. No. But funny.
Lee Harvey Oswald, what an amazing shot.
Yeah,
Well, it's like that there was a lone knifeman for Julius Caesar. This is the magic knife theory that they all attacked him.
The magic knife?
Yeah.
All right, so let's wrap it up. Check the website, snagsandsilky.com. Check out the playlist for all the episodes. The one for this episode is chock full of like creepy murder. You're bound and gagged in the back of a van, and like that pleasant music is.
You're
playing.
Listening to like Captain and Tennille on the AM radio.
Delay, that kind of.
It's called endorse the playlist. Fantastic.
The playlist is called Creepy Crawly California.
That's it.
You'll dig it. All right. Well, peace out. We're gonna Mike, stay on so we can have the inevitably even more interesting after conversation, which always happens after we stop recording. But we got to stop recording at some point, so we're gonna stop recording. You cats stick around. We got some good shit coming up in the following weeks. So peace out.
Peace.
Deuces. You got to say deuces, man.
Deuces.
Deuces.